welcome to Classical Schmassical, the anti-classical classical music podcast. Tune in every Saturday as we discuss, deconstruct, and dissect what it means to be a musician in the modern world. I'm your host, Alexa Letourneau. I use any pronouns, and our guest this week is Mark Mathison.
Hi, so I'm Mark. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a multi-instrumentalist and composer from Minneapolis. While I was in undergrad, I studied instrumental performance, but I also got a Bachelor's of Science in Physics. Um, and in the music world, as a composer, I focus on kind of the intersection of music with the physical world and kind of try to integrate science into it in some ways. I kind of find that fun. Um, And I also am concerned with kind of making new music approachable outside of just the classically trained context. I'm also very passionate about access to education and just education in general. Um, and I care a lot about inclusivity and intersectionality in fields of music and science and education, all of that. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Mark is a good friend of mine from undergrad, and we sort of became friends, playing in ensembles together where you were a bassoon, which is your sort of main instrument.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious to know, it's sort of my standard question when I have an instrumentalist on, but what do people, especially composers, get wrong about writing for the bassoon?
Um, so writing for the bassoon is difficult, to say the least.
Sure.
Um,
I've found that to be the case, certainly. My bassoon music is
uh,
garbage.
um, so the bassoon kind of has a weird combination of a lot of different factors which make it just kind of awkward
Hmm.
uh, in a number of different ways. So it's a low range instrument, so it kind of has the issues that come along with that. So it's harder for it to do more virtuosic, really technical things.
Hmm.
Um, and the sound is just slower to come out. Same issues that you have with low brass or other lower instruments. Uh, but it also has kind of this weird dichotomy of that happening, but it's also a double reed, which is usually very quick to respond. So you kind of have two ends of the spectrum happening here, um, which ends up for a weird interplay. Um, and so people tend to kind of treat it like they do other woodwinds and kind of assume that it has the same kind of facility and
Hmm.
technical abilities that upper woodwinds do. Um, and some of this might be just my own personal bias because I'm not a super technical player. I kind of I like playing, and I feel like I do better with more expressive stuff
Hmm.
um, rather than technical things. But I feel like bassoon isn't a particularly technical instrument. Some people are
Sure.
very good at it, but it takes a long time, obviously, just like any other instrument.
Yeah. No, I get that too. Even playing the flute, which is objectively a technical instrument. I'm like, but what if I wanted to sound pretty and play slow music? Because slow music is
Right.
nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, slow music is fun. Slow music is so much more fun than having to learn all these runs. But also,
Honestly,
yeah, runs are also fun when you know
yeah.
them.
Yeah, they're fun once you get them down. Um, but yeah, so there's that kind of end of it. Um, and then also the bassoon has a pretty wide range, and it kind of behaves very differently in the different ranges.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of the low range, especially. It's very hard to be technically quick
Sure. Yeah.
because you're trying to push air through 9 feet of tubing, and so
Big boy.
you're not gonna get a very fast response there.
Yeah.
Um, but when you get into the middle range or the mid to upper range, you can get some more rapid response, and so that's where you do get a lot of the more woodwind esque
Yeah,
stuff.
sure. I mean, yeah, when we've played in woodwind quintets or woodwind trios and things, and I feel like that's definitely the case where I this, I mean, I was mostly focused on my own part, understandably, but I felt
Sure.
like, especially in like the slower movements, that's when we kind of heard that sort of richness of the low bassoon versus like
Yeah.
a super high, like scalar runny things where we're,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
more perky, more high up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then when you get into like the higher range of it, the bassoon has this really like nice singing quality, but then also the fingerings go out the window in terms of making sense.
Sure.
Um, so again, the technical like easiness kind of decreases, and I think that happens with most woodwind instruments because I know for clarinet also that's kind of the way it is, and I think for flute too when I've
Yeah,
seen you play.
it's pretty much the case. I personally like low range, but that's a pretty that's a weird thing for a flutist to like, and yeah, our mid range is definitely the most virtuosic, and
Yeah.
like anybody can play fast in the mid range, and it's and
Right.
I think
Yeah.
like you just have that money range where like yeah this
Yes.
fits.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly. Um,
like
yeah.
rough
So
on the bassoon, rough, just out of curiosity, like roughly where is that money range, like note why.
uh, yeah, yeah. Uh, so let me think. Um, so kind of going from the lower end of it, um, you can get some really good quality sound without like too much of the, for lack of a better word, blarpiness
Yeah.
of the extreme low range.
Mhm.
Like you don't have to deal with as much of the like lag
Mhm.
between articulation and sound. Starting at like G2,
Mhm.
um, so that's still pretty low.
Yeah, that's
Um,
pretty low.
um, and then up to about G4. Um,
Okay.
so you have like a good 2 octaves where the fingerings make sense and you have kind of the characteristic like bassoon sound.
Yeah.
Um, and especially like the top octave or so of that,
Mhm.
the top octave of that 2 octave range is very um, res very resonant, very singing. Like that's my favorite range to play in. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's really nice.
Yeah, nice. So, if people are wanting to see like examples of really excellent bassoon writing, because like you were saying, it is super complicated, and you should probably ask a player anyways. But who are some
Yes.
composers who you feel like really get how to write for bassoon?
Um, I don't have any. Unfortunately, I don't have any like examples from more recent ones.
Hmm.
But like the pieces that I've played that felt like they were written well for bassoon and felt like they actually belonged to like a bassoon and weren't just like a cello part or like a trombone part that was
Yeah.
just transposed over. Um, they ended up being Tchaikovsky, Stravinsky, uh, and Villa-Lobos and Mozart.
Yeah.
So all like very well known in the canon.
Hmm.
Um, I just don't know super
No, that's
well
sure. I mean, like, I
less
definitely
obscure things,
have no
but
idea on most flute repertoire, and but
yeah,
no, that's really good to know. I really loved the Villalobos duet that we play, and I think
yeah,
that that's a prime example of string writing, flute writing, as
blue writing,
well. I don't know what I'm saying. It's a really good example of just excellent woodwind part.
yeah,
For
yeah,
in both cases, even if it is like really technically challenging at times.
hmm yeah. Um, but I think the thing there with all of them is, to my knowledge, the composers did at least have like some player in mind
Hmm.
for each of those. Because I know Mozart, well, he was 18 when he wrote the Bassoon Concerto, which is the piece that I'm thinking of.
Overachiever,
Um,
but all right.
yeah. um, but he wrote most of his concertos, I think, with a particular
Hmm.
soloist in mind.
Yeah.
Um, and then Stravinsky you know, did his, you know, the two like big bassoon excerpts or
Right.
are both Stravinsky. They're Firebird and Rite of Spring. And you know, if he didn't write those with a particular player in mind or like consult a player, he clearly had like some sort of familiarity because they are very technically difficult and yet idiomatic to the
Yeah.
instrument.
Yeah. That's my favorite
Um,
kind of music to play is when it just feels like, oh, they know what they are doing. This is hard,
right.
but I like it. It fits.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you get that sense from both of those solo bits. Uh, so yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I know all the time I'm like writing, especially in my orchestral stuff, I'm writing bassoon parts where I'm like, I don't know, this feels like it's not going to be possible, but I'll send it to Mark and see, hey, can you do this? And like 8 times out of 10, you're like, no, why would you? Oh my gosh, no. Um, but kind of
Even if it's not
explore.
that bad, I just
I mean, I
like to
just
give you crap.
it's good because like I like exploring that range, like the upper limit of what's possible while also figuring
Mhm.
out how do I write idiomatically for this instrument that like is baffling to too many keys first of all, but it's just bassoon is just baffling. Kind of moving
Yeah,
off of that. Hmm.
that's accurate.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah.
an accurate assessment of the instrument, I think.
Too many keys baffling. 8 out of 10. um kind of moving off of that, in terms of like more modern composers wanting to work with sort of the modern tonal landscape or whatever, what are some extended techniques that like the bassoon can do, because I really don't know any of them.
Um, so a lot of the things that the bassoon can do are kind of similar or standard to like what other woodwinds can do. So
Okay.
like um, you know, you got kind of like flutter tonguing is a thing. Um, I'm personally, I can't do that. I can't seem to figure it out. But
Sure.
it's been written for bassoon parts, and I know people that can do it. And I think it just takes a lot of like concerted effort and
Yeah.
determination to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um, and I just haven't done that.
Yeah, I
uh,
can't imagine flutter tonguing with like a thing in your mouth. I mean, that's also a flute player thing. We look at the other woodwinds and we're like, why are you putting things in your mouth? That's disgusting. But
um, yeah. So yeah. No, yeah, I understand.
gross.
having
Reeds,
seen enough,
what?
having seen enough like gross reads in my lifetime, yeah.
I no.
Um,
I am so happy that I picked an instrument that has no reeds, spit valves, or rosin. It's great.
Honestly, it just seems like the right choice.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no. So flutter tonguing is a thing. It's not super common, and I think like as far as woodwinds go, it's more difficult on bassoon than on the others.
Sure.
Something about just the shape of the reed is
Mm-hmm.
different from like mouthpieces on clarinets or saxophones, and so like single reeds have an easier time of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have no idea what it's like for an oboe. In general, I don't know what how oboes like do their thing, even though it's the other double reed.
Sure.
Um, I played an oboe once for like 4 minutes, and it was just honestly the most confounding experience.
Yeah, I mean, I made one noise on an oboe once, and I went, nope, not gonna do this ever again.
It was interesting, and I'd like to get into it, but also like
Yeah.
I feel like I
Well,
need
I
to get
mean,
better at bassoon
I
first.
would like to. It's just that
Yeah.
also time and
Oh yeah.
all of the reads are so different from what I've got going on that like.
For sure. Um, yeah. So flutter tongue is a thing. I think one of the things that uh, maybe is a little bit different for bassoon is kind of the how pitch bendy it can get.
Okay.
Um, I mean, this goes for all the reeds. I think there's like a certain amount of pitch bending that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with bassoon, tuning is very flexible. Um,
I get
and
that. It's a blessing and a
uh,
curse.
yeah, for sure. Um, so, you know, depending on the note, you can get like, I think for most notes on there, you can get like it easily like at least a half step range, like in
Oh
total.
my gosh.
So like any given note, you can probably get it at least a quarter tone flat and a quarter tone sharp.
Yeah.
And just depending on the note, it can be way more. I know, like in the middle range, I can make like an F3 play as a D3.
Hello.
And if I want to make
That's
it go sharp, I think I can make it at least G. So,
oh my
um,
gosh.
and that's with embouchure pretty much. Um,
Yeah.
so there's a good amount of flexibility in that. And I think in a piece that you wrote that we played together, it was a chamber piece. You had me, pitch bend down like a half step or a quarter tone or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I know I was like, "Hey, can bassoons pitch bend?" And you were like, "Oh yeah." uh, it was
um,
a good time. I had us both pitch bending at once. Microtonal. We love to see it.
we love to see it.
We really do.
Um, and I think like it's not something you see very often.
Yeah.
I think that's actually the only time that I've had it like written in.
Oh wow.
Um,
So
um,
fancy.
unless there was like maybe one thing in one of the concerts that we did where we just were doing like either a new music concert or like one we were doing less standard rep and I just forgot. But um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not something you see very often. And I think it's I think it's a very cool effect and it's very flexible for bassoon.
Yeah.
So
Is that
uh,
something that's like how like versatile can that be? Like can you be switching this kind of on every note or do you sort of have to set it, say like I'm going to play flat or flat for like whatever I'm playing right now or how quick can that
so
shift happen?
I mean it's temperamental.
Okay.
So like I wouldn't say like don't give me like a whole excerpt and expect me to be able to play at a quarter tone flat.
Gotcha.
You know, uh, because like note to note, the tuning tendencies on bassoon are very inconsistent. Um,
Okay.
and so you can get notes that are, a half step or a whole step apart, where one is like just tends to be like a half step flat already,
Okay, yeah.
and then the next one is like tends to be very sharp. So like, um, kind of the easiest way or like the most idiomatic way that I could see doing it would be kind of um, having like an established pitch and then bending it either way.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So it would be better
Um,
for like slower movements or slower, longer tones than like.
yeah. Yeah, you could still do it at faster tempos. It just wouldn't be as accurate.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because a lot of what we learn to do to deal with intonation is to learn the tendencies of our instrument, of our reeds,
Mm-hmm.
and of the individual notes, and then just account for those things.
Mm-hmm.
So then breaking that, we have to do more thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Think and then think the
um,
other way. Yeah.
right. So if you wanted to do it for like a faster thing, you could say like you could give like general directions, but maybe don't expect it to be as accurate. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And you can of course also play your reed. I know we've done that in wind
Yeah.
ensemble.
Yeah. So, since it's a double reed, we can just take it off our instrument and then blow on it and it still makes noise. Like the same way that oboes can do it. And then like if you just take like the clarinet mouthpiece off, it still makes a sound.
Yeah. I love it. We
Um,
we did we did this in a PDQ Bach piece and it
yeah.
was the best.
Yeah. Sounds
Squeak
like a little
squeak.
duck call and it's great.
It's so good. It's so cute.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, I haven't seen it in any piece that I played, but I've seen like in like more or I guess less serious things. I've seen people ask for like specific pitches from um, just playing on the reed.
Hmm.
Um, and so you can do that. It has a small range, and so like you can tune it to a couple of pitches, but it's
That's so cool though. It's sort of I
uh,
feel like it's sort of on to the tune of a kazoo, except you don't have that vocal element. You're just kind of kazooing.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's not the range isn't limited by your vocal cords.
Right. It's just
It's
it's
limited by the reed.
the reed. That's so fun.
Yeah. And kind of to the similar tune, we can take the vocal, which is kind of like the mouthpiece bit, off, and
The
it
bendy
also,
straw, to be fair.
yeah, it looks like
It's
a
a
bendy
bendy
straw.
straw.
And we can just play on that, and I think it sits around like a middle C.
Hmm.
Um,
And does
when
that
we do
have
that.
like pitch variants as well that you can do with?
Yeah, so we can do that. We can do some pitch variants from embouchure, and we can also like, kind of like how jazz trumpets will like put mutes in front of it, in front of the bells to kind of change the pitch and the quality. You can do the same thing with the open end,
Oh, cool.
and you get a
Yeah.
little bit of pitch variance and a little bit of tone variance. It's a smaller hole, so not as much,
Hmm.
but yeah.
Yeah. Open tube, closed tube. We love to see it.
It can't be closed completely because
Because
there's
there's
like no
yeah, you can't.
hole,
The air doesn't come out any other way.
but
Then you're just blowing into a
yeah,
bag.
yeah. Um, so yeah, there's those things. I'm trying to think. Oh, I knew I was forgetting one. Multiphonics.
Oh, cool. Love.
Um, so multiphonics are a big thing for bassoon. Um, in my experience, the bassoons that I've had just aren't very good at it.
Sure. Like so it
Um,
does depend very much on the individual player and the individual instrument both.
honestly, I don't know.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
depends. It depends a lot on the individual instruments.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and so there are like standard fingerings that you can do to make multiphonics work, but I've like tried. I would try those standard fingerings on my bassoons, and they just would not happen. I would try for like an hour
Yeah.
on just a bunch of different fingerings, and I would not be able to get one out. And it could have just been that instrument.
Hmm.
Um, I can't imagine that it would really be something that's like dependent on a player as much,
Okay.
because you're supposed to do something like weird with your embouchure to kind of like help make it come out at multiple frequencies, but
Hmm.
um, it's not supposed to be like impossible when you have like a standard fingering.
Gotcha. Yeah. I
But
know when I'm
yeah,
playing, it feels like I'm trying to like balance a light switch between on and off. It's very much
right,
the same thing. The
yeah,
way that I like approach multiphonics, where I'm like, oh no, it's the high one. Oh no, it's the low one, and like finding that spot where like both tones are
right,
coming out. It's just like it's a headache. Fun, but a
yeah,
headache.
yeah, yeah, and like when it's working, when it's going to work on your instrument, it is exactly that,
Yeah.
just kind of bouncing between the two tones. Um, but sometimes it just doesn't work for your instrument,
Hmm.
and like you'll try and play it, and just no noise will come out.
Your bassoon says no.
No. Um, I think some of that is related to the fact that regular fingerings are kind of the same way. Um,
Okay, real. Yeah.
yeah, so like the best example I can think of is E flat 3 on bassoon is just notorious because it is so out of tune, but you know, you play in two flats or more most of the time.
Right.
So like
So you're
it's
playing it
everywhere.
all the time.
And it's right in the middle range of your instrument. So it's like
Deal with.
it is
Yeah.
always there. Um and so there's literally dozens of alternate fingerings for it, for what run you're doing, for whether or not this speaks on your reed or your instrument. And
Yeah.
I was trying to help one of my fellow bassoonists one time because like our E flats were not in tune, and so I was trying to just run through different things that we could do to find something that matched. And the one that I always use, because on my instrument it was in tune and it had like not horrible sound,
Hmm.
um, just made no noise on her instrument
Oh my gosh.
at all.
Wow. Yeah, no.
Um,
Like the flute alternate fingerings are either you're switching back and forth really quickly, so you're going to leave a few fingers down that don't impact it,
sure,
or
yeah,
you're in the way high octave past the point where a flute was designed to play, figure it out.
right,
But other than that, like no, we just all use the same fingerings all the time. So that's completely bizarre to me.
no, yeah. And like we have alternate fingerings for like those same purposes, like for
Mhm.
trills or runs, and just like in the upper high range, all bets are off.
Yeah.
But you know, we also have alternate fingerings because there are certain notes like in the middle range that are just really bad.
Yeah.
Um, and so you need a bunch of different fingerings to help with the tuning for them or to help with the tone. And just because every bassoon is really, let's say, unique, um, and by that I mean temperamental. Um,
Right.
uh, and so yeah, you need alternate fingerings because sometimes the fingering that works really really well for one person just doesn't work for another person, and it could just be their reed, or it could be their instrument, or it could be their embouchure.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of different variables.
Yeah. So I think probably the safe bet if you're writing for bassoon is have a player in mind, if at all possible, and ask them. Be like,
Right.
hey, what
100%. That's the
what's
easiest
good? What
easiest
works?
way.
'Cause
And like,
otherwise, like, yeah, just sort of a shot in the dark.
yeah, and like, there's stuff online for things that should work, and
Hmm.
like, definitely just use that if you don't have one to talk to, but
Right.
like, run it by someone if you can.
Yeah, but a sure should work is as definite as you're gonna get with
Right.
multi.
Right. So it's fun, but then also like, I think another thing is that bassoon players kind of just learn to be flexible and just try to make things work because there's usually some way,
Yeah.
you know,
All those
there's
keys,
just
something's gotta work.
there's some way to make it happen, and we just need to like play around with it or talk to someone else and be
Hmm.
like, "Hey, I'm having trouble with this. What do you do?" And they're usually like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I usually try this," and then you go and try it, and it's like, "Nope, doesn't
Good.
work for me." Anything else? And they're like, "Oh, what about this? I don't usually do this because it sounds awful in my horn."
Hmm.
And then you try it and it's perfect.
Yeah. Oh,
I can't
that's
tell you the number of times where I've had like in my lessons in undergrad where I was talking with my teacher and she's like, what fingering are you using?" And I'm just like, "Oh, I'm doing this." And she's like, "Why is that working?"
yeah, that's fair. I feel yeah, that's so weird to me. And maybe explains why conductors just pick on the bassoon so much too. That's just my 2 cents. So yeah, so bassoon is your main instrument.
Right. Yes.
But then you also do a lot of other things. You do clarinet and voice and
Yeah.
piano
Yes.
solidly. And
Okay, I would not say I do clarinet solidly. I
you do
haven't done clarinet as like a primary instrument since I was about 12.
you play it well enough. I mean, I've heard you do clarinet. I like we played clarinet. You played clarinet in pep band, and I've also like heard you play clarinet as a solo instrument. And you're being too modest. You're quite good at it. But I'm
Okay.
not like doesn't matter. Um, I'm
Besides the
just
point.
like,
Okay.
but it's beside the point. I am curious as to how you ended up playing so many instruments and doing so many things, and like,
Um
what was that process like?
I mean, it's kind of who I am. Just that's my personality. Is I pick up a lot of things and I don't like to let go of them. Um,
I get that.
which you understand because I know how you are as a person.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but like like in high school, my big things were theater and like just my general classes, and like I didn't do theater at all in university.
Hmm.
you know, um, so I just have like a lot of different interests, and I have a hard time like saying no to doing things. So when people ask me to do something, I'm just like, yeah, sure, that sounds fun.
Right.
Um, and also I like learning new things. I like trying to take everything as like a learning opportunity. So like
Hmm.
even things that I'm kind of like, oh, that seems weird, might as well try it. Um, but like as far as instruments specifically, when I picked up piano when I was really little because we inherited a grand piano from my grandmother um, when I was little,
Mm-hmm.
and I just kind of took to it, and
Yeah.
so I started like teaching myself to play piano for like an hour or two today at an hour or two like every day
Yeah.
when I was 4.
Yeah.
Um, and then like 2 years later, my parents were like, "Well, maybe we should have him do lessons."
Took you a second. Yeah.
uh, yeah, so I started lessons when I was 6, and then like just since then, music has been like a big theme in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had 2 older brothers, and they both did band throughout middle school and high school. And then from them, I knew I wanted to do band
Yeah.
also. Um, and I picked up clarinet for that because I couldn't really play piano in band. Um,
Not with that attitude.
Listen, they didn't have piano parts until high school, and then they gave them to the percussionists.
Ah, percussionists always swooping in and stealing the fun stuff.
Like, to be fair, the percussionist that would always do them was a really good pianist, but
Sure.
and that was like her
Yeah.
primary instrument.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they also made our percussionists in middle school and high school take like before they did percussion, they made them have like a year or two of piano or percussion lessons.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
So yeah. Side note. Um, and then I switched to bassoon in middle school because I got bored with the clarinet basically.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
like it was fun, but the
Not enough
part
keys.
yeah, not enough keys. Uh, yeah, no, in middle school, I guess the parts just weren't super challenging
Mm-hmm.
because
Because it's middle school
the
bands.
expectation,
Yeah.
middle school band, and the expectation was like in 5th grade, you didn't know how to read music, which
Sure.
I'd been reading music since I was 4. Uh,
Yeah.
so it wasn't really there. And so I wanted to do something like new and special.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who would later become my private instructor in high school came and demoed the bassoon, and I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that seems cool. Um, and so I switched to middle school, and then played that through high school and college, and I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, this is cool. Um, and then I picked up voice lessons in college. Um, I'd always done like church choir and stuff like as a
Mm-hmm.
kid, so like I
Yeah.
always like enjoyed singing, and like I would like sing in the shower and shit,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and just like sing along to songs that I enjoy when I'm like doing homework.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow it helped my brain think.
Yeah.
Um, and then like in university, we became good friends with our friend Ruth, who is a vocalist, and she really pushed me to actually start taking voice lessons.
Yeah. I mean, same. That's how I ended up in voice lessons.
Right, yeah. Um, and then I was like, oh, wait, I really like actual choir and not and
Uh,
actually singing. So,
yeah, and not just showing up at church and being like, ah.
uh, yeah, no, and then like choir was like definitely one of the most fun things that I didn't know that I would enjoy in undergrad. Definitely. Uh,
Yeah.
so
No,
yeah.
I get that. The vocal ensembles, like choir, but also like we did consort, the early music vocal ensemble, which
Right.
like we did that before either of us took voice lessons, and that was a big inspiring thing for me. I
When
was
I
I was
couldn't really
like,
hold a pitch.
yeah, I was like, oh, okay, so Ruth keeps telling me that I should do this and this and this, and there's a lot here. I should look more into this, and then also with
Yeah.
with acapella as well, like it like
Yeah.
didn't really matter the style of singing. It was just like I
Just
really
like this is
enjoy this.
fun.
Vocal ensemble, so good.
Vocal ensembles are fun. They're
Vocal ensemble
just fun.
Vocal ensembles are, I think, more consistently fun than instrumental ensembles in my limited
Right. Yeah.
experience. Like even at high levels of intensity with both, I just like
Hmm.
I think I enjoy playing as much as I enjoy singing, but put it with other
Hmm.
people. And like there's
Yeah.
something so special and personal about a vocal ensemble.
Right.
It just like, oh,
Yeah.
hits different.
Yeah. I genuinely think that like both vocalists and instrumentalists would like hugely benefit from at least
That,
spending some
yeah.
time with the other side.
Yeah, there's a weird
If not like,
divide.
yeah, because I like also personally I found that like my vocal training helped a lot with getting bassoon because bassoon is a weirdly vocal instrument.
Yeah, I felt that too in flute. And like admittedly they are both woodwinds, but even like the
Right.
mechanism are is quite different, and I felt like my
Yeah, the breath
voice
support is
like
different, but
the voice helped so much with just my understanding of my instrument and like making
mhm.
things work and fit and feel good together.
Yeah,
It was unlike anything else.
yeah. Yeah, and also just like the different kinds of music, involved in both, and different kind of musicality involved in both. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more crossover between the two than people may think. Um,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
know it was like a fun joke in our choir for like the instrumentalists to be like, "Oh, the singers can't read the rhythms," but like, you know, they're taught differently, and also they can read the rhythms. They're just doing it a different way, and so like, I don't know.
right.
I think there's
Yeah,
this false dichotomy that exists between
yeah, yeah,
instrumentalists and vocalists when it's just like, I don't know, you know, spend time with each other and see what happens because you'll
yeah.
probably come out the other side a better musician.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, like also just spending more time
Also,
with music makes
yeah,
you better for sure. Like,
collaborate.
um, and also like I just have to say, like the most moving like performance that we did in undergrad was definitely Faria Requiem, and I'm 90% sure that's because it was a combined choir and instrumental piece. You know,
Yeah, definitely.
um, yeah, I can't imagine like being a musician now without having both sides, and so like that's very
I feel the same way.
like integral to my identity as a musician now.
Yeah,
So anyway, that's a
multi-classing.
weird tangent that we were
It
doing.
was no, but I think it's also like it's a really important discussion to have because I
Yeah.
don't know. There's it's all over like singers and musicians, and it's like shut up. You don't know what you're talking about.
No.
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 Oh my gosh. Oh, well, no, yeah. And then kind of going back to a cappella tangentially.
Mm,
So like we both arranged for the group, but like you did way more of the arrangements than I did. I just did a couple things here and there for fun. And so like you arrange a lot, and this is like even though we've both graduated now and are no longer in this a cappella group, like we're both still arranging. And I'm
mhm.
interested in the relationship between like playing so many or like doing so many different types of music and then working as an arranger composer. Is that do they feed into one another? Is it helpful or is it kind of a separate thing?
Um, like both,
Mm-hmm.
like they are very distinct things.
Yeah.
Um, but also I think like more than anything, uh, having the different backgrounds between like the different instruments and then vocal, experience
Mm-hmm.
and like the different kinds of ensembles I've been in, like chamber music or like orchestra or choirs, you know,
Yeah.
having like a or like a consort and like then like also experience with new music, having the different um like subfields, the different areas of
Yeah.
focus gives you more to work with and like just more ideas to use,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, both in arranging and composing. It just gives you a bigger toolkit and it might kind of like jumpstart you to thinking of some things that people might not necessarily think about if they're just starting off and they're kind of limited towards just like a specific style, you know?
Yeah,
I don't think
definitely.
that's like too big of a logical jump or like
Yeah.
too profound, but
Yeah.
uh,
No, I get that in my compositions when I'll like write a choir piece. I look at the choir piece that I did before I was in choir versus the choir pieces I've
mhm,
done now after like several years of being in high level choral ensembles where I'm like really
mhm,
giving it my all, and they're totally different. And the experience of
right,
being in choir gave me this
Yes.
whole other toolkit, and also like pieces to steal pieces of, because like I was like, oh, I like this chord, I'm gonna take this chord, I'm gonna use that chord. um
Right.
but then like ways to get in and out of it, and I feel like I just understand the way that it works so much better for having been
Yeah.
in it. And like now at the program where I'm at now in my master's, composers don't have a lot of performance opportunities, and it's like kind of freaking me out that this is how it's working, because for me, performing and doing all of these things is a really, really big part of how I'm composing and learning how to compose. And so, like, yeah, I totally feel that dynamic,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. 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 And yeah, like just the exposure to all the different areas is so important.
Oh, yeah.
And having the first-hand experience uh, of just working with it, because wow, like I can't tell you the number of times that I've just like I will write something and it's instrumental, but I use vocal techniques to make it sound good,
Yeah.
and and like and I use uh, it's for like an assignment that's been in a classical style, or like I'm supposed to do something with sonata form or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just pull something from what I do for like pop arrangements from a cappella, and I use it to fix like 60% of the problems that I'm
Yeah.
dealing with. Um, and it's like there is just so much interplay
Yeah.
between like what would seem entirely disparate parts of music.
Yeah. And they can be so much more interrelated too. Like, I know that part of the reason that I didn't do a ton of the arranging was because I wrote a lot of it with sort of a very new music classical frame of mind. So I was like, yeah, I
Mm,
was doing voice leading, but the chords were crunchy. And for people just with an ensemble, like, I loved our ensemble, they were incredibly talented, but it was a lot of people who were not really used to that kind of dissonance
right.
and were
Yeah.
coming to sing like 1 4 5 1. And then I was like, here, have this jazz chord, and you need to be
Have
like,
this
yeah,
D minor 9 sharp 11.
yeah, have a D minor 9 sharp 11. Why don't you? And they were like, I mean, I'll try. um,
A what now?
but it came off so well,
Whoa.
and
Oh
it
yeah, it
worked
works.
so well in the context that like I don't think there needs to be as big of a divide in those different kinds of
Hmm.
techniques, in the different,
Yeah.
like, obviously we were singing with a different vocal technique, but in terms of
Yeah.
compositionally, the music doesn't need to be that different.
Yeah. There's a lot more. Again, just a lot more intersectionality. That's not the right word, but it's the word my brain thought of.
I,
Um,
kinda, yeah. Like, there's more interplay between the different like
right.
subgenres of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what's a choir? Well, what isn't a choir?
uh, yeah. And then like as far as like composing goes, like yeah, all of that just lets me pull from more and more different backgrounds. Um, and I don't know if maybe this is just the pandemic or whatever, but like especially at like I when I've gotten back into composition lately, it's been very much like if I don't have a specific idea, I just kind of resort to like choir like sounds, and it pulls me through,
Yeah.
even though I'm writing for like solo piano.
Right. No, I mean, I'm right now working on my first, not technically speaking my first orchestra piece, but my first orchestra piece since I learned how to compose well.
Hmm.
So basically my first orchestra piece. Uh, and I was having so much trouble with it until I picked out my favorite choir piece that we did, and I said I'm
Hmm.
gonna write the whole orchestra piece based off of this, and now it's flowing like a dream, and it's so cool, and like,
Yeah.
I just think you can pull so much from vocal music, and vocal music has such a strong tradition too. Like, you're not gonna get
Yeah.
a wind ensemble piece that was written in 1717. Just hot
Right.
take.
Or earlier.
Yeah, I just said 1717 because that's the date for the choir
Oh, sure,
piece
sure, sure, sure.
that I'm using in the
Yeah.
orchestra.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, like we sung music that was from, I mean, we sung the Dies Irae and we performed it. Like, you're
Right.
not gonna get any kind of, like, you're just not gonna find any notated instrumental music that's that
Oh,
old. And
sure. Yeah,
there's,
yeah,
there
yeah,
just
yeah.
isn't this like centuries long tradition, because, like, humans have been singing
Since
since
forever.
humans,
Yeah.
probably. I'm not an anthropologist, I don't know this for sure, but we talk a lot about it in like music appreciation or whatever, that, like,
Yeah.
the first music was not a human, it was a bird, and then the humans were imitating the birds, which, like, is probably true, but it sounds really
Sure.
pretentious when you say it like that. but
Yeah.
but it is true,
Okay.
like, vocal music's just been a thing.
It's just there.
It's just there. um so, kind of, like, widening the scope of doing a lot of different types of things, outside of just music. Like, you also got a degree in physics alongside your bassoon performance degree.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I am really curious as to your opinion on, so the sort of a divisive topic in the world right now is, like, STEM versus the arts, and STEM versus the arts, and it's always pitted head to head, and, like, school programs are STEM versus the arts, and you have arts high school and science high. So I'm really interested into what you think about sort of what the ideal relationship would be between, sciencey topics and artistic topics, and how can we teach those effectively together, or what does that look like? I know it's a
Okay.
big question.
uh, I mean, like, it's hard to kind of relate them together and like make them hold hands.
Sure.
Uh, but like, my instinct is you just can't really have one without the other because they do just, I like, again, just they kind of play into each other more than you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, how much of, to kind of like, as a weird example, or just as an example, I don't know. Like, how much of modern instruments would we have without like more research into like acoustics and like how like engineering and that part of it. Uh, but then, on the other side, like a lot of new arts and like music and visual art and everything comes from engineering and scientific discoveries. Like, we have like, I don't know, Stuart Semple, for example, is an engineer, but he creates new pigments and new colors uh,
Yeah.
for people to use in their visual art. And then, like, you also have like synthesizers, and different kinds of overtone engineering, and things like that. So
Yeah.
like you know, they do in a weird way go hand in hand. Um,
Yeah.
like, not, they don't like
They're not.
fully
Yeah.
lock in, but like, there is relationship between them. Um, but like, you can't really have a well-rounded person without one or the other. They're both really important. You need
Yeah.
to be able to have you need to develop kind of the logical reasoning, the like the curiosity to explore and to learn more about the physical world around us. You need to nurture that, but you also need to nurture the need to explore ourselves and what makes us like human and what connects us together. You know,
Yeah. Definitely.
like the in a weird way, like philosophically, the two sides of they're like opposite sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
You need to connect with the world around us, but we also need to connect with ourselves and the people around us too. And you can't. I don't think you can like reach your full potential or be like a really uh, you, the best version of yourself without nurturing both sides.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, the burglar alarm. Okay, the burglar alarm. The inventor of the burglar alarm is contested, but one of the people who is credited with inventing the burglar alarm is Leon Theremin, who also invented the theremin. And,
Right.
like, that's a really cool instrument. Lots of people are talking, or like even like automatones are now the big
thing.
thing, the new electronic instrument that like everybody has to have. And like there's so much engineering that went into that.
Yeah,
And
right,
like even if we put aside like the instruments that haven't changed for hundreds and hundreds of
right,
years,
yeah,
like they definitely, those instruments grew up as like engineering and science were also growing up. They grew up side by side.
yeah,
And there's
yeah.
it's still going on today. And I think that like they really are just so intrinsically linked. And I know like you know this story, but like I applied to a ton of schools for undergrad and only one was for music and everything else was for engineering because it was they're both huge passions of mine.
Yeah.
And this again, the dichotomy that's between them, I don't think is necessary or helpful for anybody involved.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Like,
And yeah,
yeah, no.
frustration. One of my SAT essays was like, should the music program at a school be cut so that they can do a new chemistry lab? And I was like, find the budget elsewhere. Was basically my whole
Right.
my whole
Yeah.
argument. Which like the SAT committee did not particularly enjoy that argument, but I liked it. I thought it was a well written essay of like, no, you shouldn't cut either thing.
Right. Yeah.
So kind of moving off of that a bit. So like I know that it's kind of for me it was sort of a thing where I came into undergrad as a composition and psychology dual degree, because of wanting to make sure that I would have a job if the music thing fell through or whatever. And I know that like our mutual friend Ethan did the same thing with violin performance and chemistry, but both of us ended up dropping our STEM degrees because we were like, actually no, the music's kind of really what I want to do. And I'm curious what your relationship is with that, because I think that both of us wanted to have not exactly something to fall back on, but sort of a secondary interest that like, oh, this is going to probably be more profitable. And was there any amount of
Mhm.
that when choosing to dual degree in both sort of unrelated yet related fields?
Uh, like, I want to say no, and because I want to say that, like, my passions were entirely intrinsically driven and whatever, but probably that was an influence.
Hmm.
Actually, like, it was definitely an influence. I don't think it, like, made the decision for me.
Yeah.
Um, because I have, like, it's similar to how I've always had a passion for music as long as I can remember. I have always had a passion for science and always had a
Yeah.
passion for, like, I mean, in physics, I focus on like astronomy, astrophysics, cosmology. I've always had like this profound interest in like space and just what is happening in with our
Yeah.
planet and the solar system and the universe as a whole. Um, so like both of those things have just happened in tandem as I've lived.
Hmm.
Um, and like even in high school when I was like starting to think about like what I wanted to do in college, it was like music was already there. I knew
Yeah.
that I wanted to do something with music basically since like eighth grade, and that I wanted it to be like a theme in my life since eighth
Yeah.
grade. But also like I really really enjoyed like science and chemistry and all of that stuff. Uh, and I was like, no, I really enjoy like math and this more and science and this more logical things too. But I don't really like engineering. And it
Hmm.
like kind of narrowing down exactly what I wanted to work there was kind of a several year process because I thought I wanted to do chemistry for a while or like engineering, and I was like, I took those classes in high school, and I was like, no.
Never mind.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I took physics my senior year, and it was just like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that final piece just kind of like fit in. Um,
Yeah.
and as I was doing that and doing my college applications, it was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And like the timing on that was really good because if it had been, a few months later, it would
Right.
have impacted my college search a bit. Um, I ended up going to Illinois Wesleyan because they allowed this like dual degree program,
Yeah.
um, and because they were so encouraging of it. Um, but so like that kind of motivation and that desire was already there. in me, but also, people were definitely telling me, oh, like there was definitely like the voice in the back of my head, first of all, saying like, oh, music isn't profitable. You're not gonna be successful,
Yeah.
you know. Uh, but then also like, I mean, I did when I our high school did like a scholarship for students intending to go into performance, and they picked one, and they gave a small scholarship to uh, one student who was planning to do a music performance degree uh, after they graduated senior year. And so I got this scholarship, and I talked with the person who basically like founded the band program at my high school. And his like main advice for me, like 2 months before I left for college you know, was basically have a backup, you know.
Yeah.
And this was someone who was fundamental to the music program at my high school and in my entire school district. And he was saying he didn't say don't do music. He said don't do music performance.
Right.
Because just basically you need to have a backup. And so he encouraged me to go to a BME program and do music education instead, because as a music education person, you can still be a performer, and you could still like have a career as a performer if you're good enough. But then if that doesn't pan out, then you can be an educator too. And then we went through this whole conversation, and like at the end, and it was like, yeah, I'm planning on doing physics too. And he's like, oh yeah, that works too.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, the gist of that whole conversation was basically, don't just try to be a performer.
Yeah. Don't spend your whole life in a practice room and not develop any other skills.
That was part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, the short story, yes, I want to say that this was entirely internally motivated, but like we are a product of the society we grew up in, and the society we grew up in says music is not
yeah.
music is not what you do with your life,
Music is not valuable, and it's not profitable, and if you do this, you will, never be independent, never have a life living for yourself, starving artist, all that. And I get that. Oh, I get that. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the reason that I did composition, truly, is because I said, well, even if I'm not like locking myself in a practice room for hours and hours and hours a day, like I'll have more time to do other things, and I can get better at more things. And also, like, there was just less of a fear of, am I gonna be good enough? Because I don't know, something about composing is just sort of a natural expression versus something that I'm consciously working on. Whereas flute and voice are like, if I want to be good at this, I have to work, and I have to work hard.
Right.
Versus the work that I do in composition doesn't feel like work, and so it felt like a safer option. But even so, I was like, dropping my psychology degree was scary. Really scary.
Sure. Yeah. I think both of us aren't like super naturally competitive people.
Yeah.
Like, to some extent we are, but like we don't have
in weird ways. And so like, yeah.
Right. Yeah, like there's not as much drive to like I'm gonna start over. For me, like I can't be only motivated by competition, or I can't be like severely motivated by competition, because then that ruins it for me.
Yeah.
And it makes it a chore, and it makes it awful. Like for me, music has to be an expression of myself, and it just has to be like artistic expression. It has to be something I do for my enjoyment primarily.
Yeah.
Because
that's
like,
how I feel about it too. Yeah. Because like if
like,
I'm striving to be the best in the world, no, I
no,
can't be.
Like, it's not going to happen for me.
There's maybe
like,
4 or 5 people in the world who have the capacity to be the best flute player in the world.
Right.
And I'm not one of them. That's just nope.
Yeah,
But I do
it's
it
just
because I
like,
love it. And that's how I
right.
feel about all of music. It's just like I love
Yeah,
it, and
and
I try to convince people to love my music too. That's
yeah, exactly. And it's just like, I feel like for me, doing it for any other reason would just be doing it for the wrong reasons. Like,
hmm
and that may not be true for other people, but for me, that is true.
sure. And
Um,
like, I also like there's you always hear like, oh well, like musicians are musicians because you could never see yourself doing anything else, or worse, you could never do anything else. It's the only thing you're good at, and I hate hearing that
yeah, that's
because
awful.
like I'm good at a lot of things.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I do the one that I love, and I could 100% see myself doing other things. I was almost a roboticist. I think I'd be a phenomenal roboticist. That'd be so good. If I was building robots, I could 100% see myself doing that. But I'm not. And that's fine.
Yeah,
And so yeah, I just hate the sentiment of like musicians are musicians because it's the only thing in their lives that brings them meaning. And
it's the
if you could
only
do
thing that's important to them.
right, if
Yeah,
you could
no.
do anything else, you wouldn't do music. And I'm like, you realize how that's a really hurtful sentiment to musicians, even though you usually hear it from musicians about like, oh, I'm so
Right.
passionate. Like, no, that's not healthy, friend.
Yeah, again, going back to the well-roundedness, like, do something else. Have
Yeah,
something else, because you need to bring something else into your music to make it have meaning. Music
yeah,
doesn't have meaning on its own.
yeah.
You
Very
know?
little does. Everything's a social construct. I was also almost a sociology minor. So let's talk about
Important to note.
let's talk about intrinsic meaning and social constructs. Wait, no, let's not. Not right now.
Maybe not dive into that right now.
No, not as we near the end of our episode. But just sort of as a wrapping up, I'm curious as to how, in your personal experience, do music and physics kind of feed off of one another? Like, how do you combine them? What goes on in that process? And yeah,
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's kind like there's not too many ways. Like I find a lot of inspiration in kind of like the physical processes that happen in physics.
mm-hmm.
And so written. um, I've written a few pieces that are based on like physical concepts or something. And like, I think one of my favorite compositions was one where uh, I took some data from stars, from nearby stars in like our galaxy, and kind of like which wavelengths of light are absorbed, I think. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was a few years ago. I don't exactly remember the process, but I took the data from their starlight and then used them to like compose a scale or compose a set of pitches that I could use for the whole piece, and that kind of used that to shape uh, the like the scales, chords, the I can't think of the word, like the melodic and harmonic content
Yeah,
that I used. Um, and then I also just made it programmatic to be like, oh, the formation of a star, you know,
yeah,
and that's one of my favorite pieces that I've ever written. I feel like
yeah,
even though it was early in my like compositional life, I feel like it still like holds up pretty well.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. And like,
uh,
it's sort of like spectralism, but also
in a weird way,
not. Because
like
yeah,
it's spectralism in a very literal way,
it's
because
spectralism in the most literal way, but not
because
in
I
the way that
just took
anyone else talks about it.
yeah, I took it. I just took the star spectra
Yeah,
and used that. Uh, so
right.
not at all music spectralism, but
But spectralism, which yields
science.
almost spectralism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
an spectralist comes.
Spectralist podcast.
Wait.
um, so like I think like I don't know, physics inspires me just as a person to live. I don't know. uh, like I always want to be learning. I always want to be finding out more. And like, so there's some things. This is going to be completely the most nerdy thing I say all night. Uh, but there's some like it's just really beautiful things about physics, like
Yeah.
from like both like the processes and also just the like weird symmetries that happen in the just mind-bogglingly insane like scale of the universe,
Yeah.
and how like we can just use math, basically like weird math, but still math, and numbers to describe everything that's happening. And if we
Yeah.
had a way to just map all that data and plugged in a bunch of equations, we could just, I mean, we couldn't because quantum mechanics screws up everything, but theoretically we could, just project everything and
Yeah.
play the universe, from a certain point up until today and into the future.
Yeah.
There's just some really profound, insane amount of beauty in kind of like talking to the universe in its own code, it
Yeah.
seems like. Um, I kind of
Yeah.
forgot where I was going with this, but like it inspires me to learn more, to uh, just keep doing what I'm doing, to just find out more, and like finding a
Yeah.
way to express that in music is also like really fun.
Yeah.
And when you do it well, it works.
Yeah.
You know, I've done it. I've done it well, and I've also done it very poorly. If you do it poorly, it does not
Me
work.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah,
I think
if
that's
you do it
really
well, I think it really.
I think it's really beautiful. And
Yeah.
also, like, it is worth noting that, going back to the idea of having a backup and getting degrees and things that are useful, you have a degree in bassoon performance and physics, and what are you currently doing for work?
I'm an ESL teacher in Hong Kong,
Yeah,
so
right. So, like, do what brings you joy, and, it'll all be great.
yeah, it should be noted. This also
Right.
brings me joy. I care a lot about teaching.
Like, this man is an English teacher now, so, like, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's all gonna work out.
Yeah.
And
So
all these dichotomies, and none of them true.
none of them make sense.
None of them
You
make
know,
sense.
none of them
Yeah.
are real. None of them make sense. Just
Just,
ignore them.
ignore it.
Do do
Do what's good, fam.
do what makes you happy. Do what brings you meaning.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that
Yeah.
that's what we're here for. Well, thank you so much to Mark for joining us here at Classical Schmassical. If you enjoyed the show, there is plenty more where that came from, so do make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you would like to continue the conversation on bassoon, multi-instrumentalism, or the relationship between STEM and art, please join the Discord linked in the description or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/classical schmassical. That's schmassical, SCHMASSICAL. And remember, stay classy and questionably classical.